I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna do some resist dyeing on yarn with a twist and a knot and some zip ties. I just listed 3 of the different ways that I do resist dyeing on yarn. And that's right, we're gonna do 3 different resist techniques all on one skein. Maybe it'll be a little chaotic, but I also think that it could be a little bit of fun. Resist dyeing is where you use something to physically block the ability of the dye to access part of the yarn. So in the case of a zip tie, pulling this really tight means that we can dye these areas but not what is within the zip tie. Another form of resist dyeing that I do a lot is to twist the skeins and dye it this way. I've done this many times. Sometimes I twist without linking it back in. And then yet another way you've seen me do some resist dyeing here is a more silly way, but involves adding a knot into the yarn. And so these are the 3 ways I plan to do the resist dyeing on our yarn today. I think we're gonna start with the twisted skein and then go to the knotted and then go to the zip ties, because this technique should leave us with the most amount of white. This will have some white and undyed area inside, and then with this we can really pinpoint what areas we preserve before our final layer of dye. These are all physical resists. Think of folding a t-shirt for tie-dyeing. There are other types of resists that you can use, like wax or certain glues that will remain on your fabric until you wash it. I don't really recommend using those on yarn because it's harder to rinse things out of yarn than it would be to rinse out of like a t-shirt or something. Speaking of the yarn, all of the yarn I just showed you is Knit Pick Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino wool, 25% nylon. And if you want to learn more about the yarn or the dyes or anything else I'm using in this video, I will have links and affiliate links down in the video description. And I may earn a commission if you make a purchase through one of my affiliate links. I need to twist my skeins for the first round of resist. And as for how much twist I'm putting in, I don't know how to describe how I'm deciding how much. I'm really sort of flying by the seat of my pants a little bit here until it feels like a good level of tautness. Now, because I'm going to want a fair amount of white left behind, I think I don't want to do this first layer of dyeing while the yarn is dry. Now, starting with dry yarn can be a form of resist. If you have a yarn that is not absorbent, then if you add it to a dye bath while the yarn is dry, then it's going to be harder for the dye to reach certain areas of the yarn. However, if the yarn is absorbent, like Stroll is, then all of a sudden, this one doesn't have quite as much twist. I'm going to redo it. Then all of a sudden, you are going to soak more of the liquid in like a sponge. And yes, some of the dyes will strike to the outside versus the inside, but you could actually end up with more coverage, and having some water in here beforehand will be a little bit of a resist and block some of the color. A little counterintuitive, I know. And so therefore, we're gonna go and pre-soak this. For any real specific length of time per se, but really just to get it pre-wet while I'm letting our dye bath heat up. And so even spraying it with the water is getting a lot of liquid in here. Gosh, maybe someday I should, within one pan, do twisted skeins starting wet versus starting dry all in one pot. Ooh, I could do it 3 ways. One of them I could twist dry, then pre-soak. One of them I could pre-soak and then twist while it is wet. And then the other I could twist while dry and add in while dry. If you want to see me do that, please let me know down in the comment section. I always come up with fun experiments I can do while working on these videos. For our dye bath today, we're going to use my catering steam pan. This is a 4-inch deep stainless steel pan across 2 burners on my stove, and we're heating things up right now. I added 24 cups of water, and I'm going to bring over 6 tablespoons of white vinegar. And now I need to step back and think about the colors that I want to use today. I'm considering doing this with primary colors because I always enjoy the way those blend together. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and dye the first 2 layers of color, and then we'll decide if we want the 3rd color to be a blue or if we want it to be a purple or what. But I think I want to start with a yellow. Now I will also admit I am working through some dye stocks that I've already had made, so I will probably have a lot more yellow in here than I will the pink, but that's okay. Oh, and ignore the stains on the bottom of the pan. But let's add 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of what should be, yes, a 1% stock solution of brilliant yellow. And I'm going to rinse off the spoon. This should be approximately 0.45 grams of our brilliant yellow dye because we have 45 milliliters of it total. This is not a ton of pigment. However, given that we have only a small amount of the yarn exposed, I think we're going to have a very saturated yellow on parts of the yarn and then a lot less color on other parts of the yarn. But I'm going to let this heat up a little bit longer before we bring the yarn over. We are nice and steamy. I'm going to reduce the heat a little more, and I'm going to squeeze out most of the liquid from our pre-soak. And then I'm going to bring the yarn over and pop it in using my tongs to help get a little bit more coverage on the top. But this is where I'm basically going to leave it now. I mean, one plus side of using a steam pan like this to dye the yarn is that you can see it all like this. But a definite downside to this is that we don't have quite as much liquid to cover the yarn all the way, which is fine. I'm not worried about that because often the yarn floats anyway. Now we basically just need to wait for all the dye to absorb. I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. If this yarn were not twisted with this amount of acid, it would only take a couple minutes for the yellow to absorb, but it's gonna take more time just because of the resist that we have here. We have less yarn on the surface area available to soak up the color. So if I notice that the dye bath is cleared before the timer has gone off, then we could go ahead and remove the yarn, but we'll keep an eye on it. It has been 30 minutes, and we do have a lot of yellow on the yarn, but there is still also yellow in the dye bath. But you can see, even just from moving it a little bit, that we do have some nice resist. You can see some of those white patches show up. Now I'm gonna need to and I'm gonna turn off the heat. Actually, I'll leave the heat on for a bit because I'm gonna bring a yarn mop in. I'm gonna need to let this yarn cool off for a while so that way I can comfortably handle it. Thankfully it's winter, so that should not take very long, but I'm gonna set this aside. And I'm going to bring over a yarn mop to show just how much, or really how little, yellow we have left in here. Now this is a bonus skein of yarn that I'm bringing over literally to just soak up everything that's left. And you can see just even like initially just how pastel the yarn looks going in, and also how quickly the color is clearing. Sometimes having more surface area really does help. And so actually at this point, because I'm going to need to wait a little bit before we start the next round anyway, I'm going to turn off the heat and I'm just going to leave this yarn in here, even though we've soaked up basically everything already. And in probably 30 minutes to an hour, then we might go ahead and get ready for the next round, but I think I will increase the water level as well. Before I go ahead and untwist the yarn, I figured I'd remove this. We are completely cool now because it's just been a couple of hours, because sometimes that's what happens in the ChemKnits kitchen. All right, I'm gonna start heating this up again, and we can go untwist the yarn. But actually, before I actually go and untwist it, I brought the yarn back over because we can squeeze out this liquid back into the dye bath. And sometimes I will do this and like collect it and then pour it back in, but may as well do it all in one swoop. All right, we're gonna take the yarn and just simply untwist it. And you can see we have a lot of white, a lot of yellow sectioning. It's a little bit hard to see what the patterning is like. So I'm actually gonna pop up a photo of one of the full skeins from Hanukkah night, I think it was 4 last year, just so that way you can see the type of pattern we get. Now, a lot of times with this type of technique, what I like to do is go ahead and do this multiple times, but we are going to be doing it multiple times today, just with different types of resist. Now, the plus side of the zip tie resist we're going to do in the end is that I'm really going to be able to control what colors are within the resist. When we're going to knot the yarn, it's going to be a little bit more random, just because it's a little harder for me to control what is in the center of this knotted area. But I'm aiming for it to take place like in the center of the yarn overall, and so hopefully we've got some yellow preserved and some white. But I'm pulling it a little bit tight. I don't think I've ever done the knot technique starting with like damp yarn. I think I've only ever done it starting with dry, so I don't know if I'm able to stretch things out a little further now that it's damp, but you know, we will see what happens. I'm sure that whatever color I do over this, we will have very little yellow left, but maybe we'll have some. Certainly we're gonna have some variation between the yellow and I think the pink that I'm gonna put over it. So we'll have some like pink and more orange sections. But yeah, I don't know how much yellow is gonna be preserved. I suppose I could have done this and done 2 knots, but we're just gonna do 1 and we'll see where we are when we open things up. Because then when it's time to do the zip tie resists, we can conceivably make sure that we include, if there's yellow left, some of the yellow in one of those resist points. But again, we'll see. As things are heating up, before we bring over the dye, I'm gonna add an additional 8 cups of water with 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, just to increase the water level and replace any liquid that has evaporated. I am approaching the end of my deep magenta dye stock, and I don't feel like mixing more right now. This is a color I like to have as a dye stock, but I'm not doing any stock solution making today. Now, the best way for me to determine how much I had would be for me to get one of my graduated cylinders, then I could measure it, but okay, that's 15 milliliters. Okay, I'm gonna say we have approximately 30 milliliters of this color because we're gonna go rinse out the bottle now. Okay, we're gonna bring this last little bit of pink over. I'm gonna go ahead and rinse out this bottle and attempt to remove the tape. But otherwise, I'm gonna let this heat up before we add our yarn. We could let it get hotter, but we also don't need to. All right, we are going to come in with our 4 skeins and trying to do this with it untwisted, putting it in. And even though they're mostly at the surface, I'm just going to let a little bit of pink get on that area on the surface. This is really, really pretty. I am so excited to see what happens. Okay, but I'm gonna be patient. I'm gonna do the same thing I did last time. I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes, but I don't think it'll necessarily take that long. I will come back and check in to see. This is also a color that can absorb on the faster side, so we'll see what happens when I come back in a little bit. It's been about 13 minutes and our dye bath is looking really, really clear. So what we're gonna do is remove our yarn. Once again, we're gonna need to let it cool off for a bit so that way I can really comfortably handle it. But we may not need to wait quite as long as last time, just because this time I'm able to squeeze out more of the liquid, which will make our lives a little bit easier. But super pretty, maybe even a little bit of glazing going on. Yeah, I see some glazing from that pink, which is beautiful. I think that there's nothing left in here, but we may as well bring in our yarn mop just to show. I don't think we're picking up any pinks. This is still going to read very, very yellow to me, but we'll leave it in here. And gosh, I guess I'll just have the heat on low and we'll wait the rest, the 15 minutes that are left on the timer, to see if our yarn has cooled enough for me to work on it. As I lay out this yarn on my countertop, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Tamara Spanes, Don Jans, Bernadette Crum, Jessica Parco, and the rest of the Fiverr patrons whose names you see on the screen right now. Patreon is a really great way you can help support all of the content here on YouTube, and I offer a lot of really fun perks, such as early access to the new Dyepot PS series, and then depending on the level, behind the scenes sneak peeks and more. You can find more information over at patreon.com/ChemKnits. All right, let's open these up. Ooh. Immediately I see some yellow and ooh, look at all that yellow and white that we have there. Oh, that is so fun. Now, the reason why I have moved from being over at my sink to being here over at the countertop is that when we go and start applying the zip tie resists, I thought I would want to have things opened up so that way I can try to preserve certain colors. And I think that we're going to try to preserve a little bit of everything. Now, there's a fair amount of consistency from skein to skein. Like the resist area here, like yes, there's some pink in the middle. There's a big section of pink on one side, but we also have some of our yellow and white in the middle. It's really cool to do this on top of yarn that already had color just to see what we would end up with. But now I need to both decide what color I'm gonna over dye it with and figure out where I want to have my resists. Trying to decide how I want to do this. And I think what I'm gonna do is try to rotate things so that way we have the most yellow here in the middle. Then I'm gonna fold this section over. Okay, so then that's on the inside. Okay, and then I'm gonna take 2 zip ties and cinch them tight right here. The thicker you have the yarn in the spots where you're gonna put the resists, the more like resist you'll have, sort of the bigger the resist will be. I have done this in the past, not that I recommend it because it took forever, where I took yarn and thread and applied resists only a couple strands at a time, and you can get really, really tiny resists that way. But it just took a very, very long time. So I guess it's up to you if you think that that is worth it. But I figured since we're folding everything anyway, we may as well introduce a section in here that maybe will get a little bit less color as well, just because it's a little more folded over. Even though our dyes should be able to access a lot of this area that is exposed. And the 2 zip ties is just to make a little bit more area covered up. And then over here, what I'm gonna do is add just 1 more zip tie over an area, and I'm attempting to pick a spot. That one might be mostly orange, but I'm attempting to pick a spot where I both see orange and pink, so that way both of those colors are preserved. Now, more recently, a lot of the resist dyeing I've done, I've applied the final color, the main color first, and then over that, I have applied the colors I wanted in the resist spots. That gives you a lot of control over the colors that are left behind because you can apply them as they are. But, you know, you can have fun and do it in different ways. And yeah, I think here we are ready to go for our final layer of color. Do I think that this overall technique is the end all be all and that everyone should always, you know, try to do 3 different types of resist on top of each other? Not necessarily, but this is more of a point that you can layer similar and different techniques together to get what you're going for. Our final color is one of my favorites. It is Caribbean Blue. I want to do, yeah, I'm going for a little bit more of it than I had of the pink. I'm doing 3 tablespoons, so the same amount of blue as I had yellow. Bringing over the rinsed off container. Now at this stage, I have so little blue left in that storage bottle that I could have rinsed that out just like I had done with the pink and brought all that color over. The reason why I'm not doing that is that I did not want any more color than the 45 milliliters that we've added. And I can talk more about that once we add our yarn in. And, ooh, this is so pretty. And the reason for not wanting too much more color is that I didn't want the blue, like I wanted it to sort of take over and be our dominant color, but I didn't want it to overwhelm things too much, if that makes sense. And so I know we're gonna have some muddier greens where there's oranges were located, but you can even see we're gonna have some beautiful greens and blues in there as well. And I am so excited to see what this is gonna do. Now, I'm gonna set a timer for 30 minutes. We're actually gonna let things sit for 30 minutes this time, but really we have to be patient. And remember that some amount of white and yellow and pink and orange, hopefully, will be pops on this colorway when we go ahead and open things up. But I'm just gonna let it be and we'll see where we are in a little bit. It's been 30 minutes and we have a little bit of blue left. You'll see it more once I start removing it. But this I'm going to leave behind. Now, with a lot of colors, if there's a little bit of color left after, 30 minutes, I might turn off the heat and leave the yarn in there to finish cooling off. We are not doing that with this circumstance. And oh my gosh, check that out. It's very steamy. Look! Yay! Okay, but the reason why we're not doing this here is that with Caribbean Blue, I have found that if you let it cool, you can absorb that last little bit of color, but then you're more likely to have bleeding later on. So this is a color where it is best to remove the yarn while things are still hot. Now, that last little bit of blue, I'm not going to leave it behind entirely. We've got our yarn mop. And, ooh, to show also just how little blue there actually is, I have a feeling that the yarn is going to be shifted a little bit green, but it's still predominantly a yellow color. Gosh, it's going to be hard to say what color it is. But you can see that even just adding this yarn, we're soaking up that little bit of color really quickly. But I'm gonna go ahead and leave this yarn mop in here for 30 minutes. And in the meantime, we're gonna let the rest of our yarn cool so we can remove those resists. Okay, you know what? As I turn off the heat, things are looking a little bit more green to me. There's a little bit more blue than it looked at first. It's still a very minty, yellow leaning green, but a very pretty bonus color. So I'm gonna set that aside to cool. And even though it's been 30 minutes, we're still a bit warm. So we're gonna cool longer before we open everything up. Oh man, you can see where the pink hit and where it didn't. This is so pretty. Okay. Oh, and look. Ooh, we got some of those colors peeking through. Because not only with the zip ties does the resist happen in the spot, but it's harder for the dye to get into this whole little area. Oh, this is so fun. I am so excited. Look at that pop of color. We have a hint of white. We definitely have some orange and some pink in there. Oh, fun. Oh, fun. Okay, and over here, I have orange and pink. Now, this kind of effect with multicolors in one resist spot can absolutely happen if I were to add the colors onto the resists second. Because I could, you know, use multiple colors with my eyedroppers in one section. So we definitely have options there, but this is so fun! I am a very happy camper. All right, I am gonna remove the rest of the resists. This is so fun. The one thing I did not really intend for was that we have a little bit of symmetry looking here, which was not the intent. The intent was not to be like halfway in the middle of the knot and to have these feel a little equidistant, but it is what it is, and this gives us this really fun, busy, but really fun yarn. We still have some white. Do we have a little bit of white on all four? Yes, we do. We kept some of that. So we have a lot of different colors in here, but now we can go wash it. Let's wash all our yarn together. I maybe need to make a whole playlist of yarns I've dyed using just the primary colors. Because layering them on in different ways has a lot of different results, which is fun. Now, I could have done this with non-primary colors. I could have done this with, say, pink, bright red, and then a dark purple, where you would have something that would still be a little bit chaotic, but also in terms of contrast, but also a little more balanced in terms of hue. The perk of using these primary colors is that you can really feel the impact of each color, because layering any two of the colors together creates a bit of a shift. And I think that is fun. Not to mention, I'm happy that even after soap, we're not seeing any color bleeding. Woohoo! All right, so I am gonna now remove the yarn. All right, I'm gonna put it through the spin dryer so it doesn't drip while I go take it upstairs. I'm gonna wash that yarn mop off camera, and then we'll take a closer look at the finished yarn. Here is the finished yarn. Yes, we are busy, but I really, really like it. And I'm realizing that in the center section we have yellow, but there's also some orange that was preserved. And I think all of them have a little bit of orange preserved in that center area, in addition to having orange and pink preserved from those zip tie resists on either end. Yes, it is chaotic, but it gives it like a floral explosion kind of feeling. Now, I know for a lot of you watching, there are some of you that like some white left behind in the yarn, and some of you who don't. In this particular project, I intentionally tried to keep some of that white in here, sort of as evidence that we have one spot that was within a resist on each of the 3 techniques. Which, considering how random the first 2 techniques were, it's pretty reasonable that we had that left. Because don't forget, we started out dyeing our twisted skeins of yarn. Then we untwisted them, knotted the yarn, and dyed that. Then we undid the knots and applied our zip tie resists, which gave us the most control over where these colors ended up. Our yarn map today is really pretty. It is a very mint green, but leaning more towards the lime end of the spectrum. There are hints that are more blue, hints that are more yellow. It is a lovely pastel layered tonal. It has very little to do with our yarn. I'm looking to see if there's any of this color anywhere, and maybe a little bit in this skein. There's a hint in there, but overall, I wouldn't even call this pastel like a pastel version of one of the colors in the yarn. You could get away with a contrasting pastel, maybe that was a pale like pink, orange, or blue, even purple, but this minty color is a little too far removed from the greens I see in the yarn. But again, let me know what you think and if you would blend these yarns together for some kind of way, because there's another way you could look at this. The fact that this color is not in here at all could mean that the 2 could work for color work, but maybe not. I suppose that's the one downside to having some whites left in here. Otherwise, if I wanted to do some kind of color work with this yarn, because I love using a wild variegated yarn as a contrasting color for stranded color work, you could use white as a contrasting color if you didn't have this white in here. I suppose you could use black, but since some of the colors are a little bit deeper, they may not have as much contrast, but it would still be fun. Ooh, navy could be pretty, but I digress. You remember when I removed the yarn from the pink and I said, oh, I think we have some glazing. I think we have some glazing here. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. And once again, you do not have to layer different type of resists to get a wild and fun yarn. The point of the video is not just to show that you can layer different types of resists. You can layer different types of techniques. You can kettle dye your yarn to get a tonal, and then on top of that, hand paint a section of color. And then on top of that, do immersion speckles. There may be times when you need to consider the order of operations. If you have a color that is prone to back staining, like for example, Caribbean blue or emerald green, in those cases, if you're gonna want to use those colors and then follow up with an immersion step where you have a lot of water in your dye bath, maybe you want to have the Caribbean blue and the emerald green be the last colors that you add, just to avoid that back staining. And in particular, I want to refer you to some videos where I speckled yarn and then put the yarn inside an immersion bath to see what might happen and to get evidence of that back staining. I feel like the results we got today are completely awesome. And I also want to acknowledge that if you are a dyer who dyes at a larger scale, this is probably not something you're going to want to do because it's very hands-on, very challenging to scale this technique up. But I like to take risks, and I'm happy to do that so that way you don't have to see, okay, this isn't worth my time, or gee, I like that resist from one knot in the yarn. I'm going to do that before I double process it, or what have you. So if you appreciate my willingness to try just about anything, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. while you're at it, give a video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. This is by far the biggest thing you can do to help support the content here. If you want other ways to support the content, go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon or join to become a channel member here through YouTube. I have more information about all of that either down in the video description or on YouTube. There is a join button where you can learn a little bit more about the perks I offer there. Experimenting aside, if you want to see me do this again to create a colorway that is still fun but maybe a little bit less chaotic, I'm not saying to do something completely monochromatic, but we could do something where we layer a pastel with a bright, with a deep color all within one family, where we'd still have a lot of contrast, but it would have a little bit less chaos. I'd be happy to do this again because I had a lot of fun and I really like the way it turned out. Thank you so much for watching.